Well, we'll get to the IPL auction in just a bit, but the big story of the day, the brutal cuts that we saw on the Lal Street. Indian stock markets recording their biggest weekly fall that we've seen in 6 months, ending deep in the red for the third week in a row. Now, Friday's session was a big reason for this performance. Fears of a possible resurgence of COVID-19, given the high-level meetings and a revival of few safety and testing protocols by the centre and some state governments, spooked the stock markets. The Sensex and the Nifty falling sharply. The Sensex lost nearly 900 points. The Nifty fell below 17,850. And with this, indices have lost ground for the fourth day running, making it the longest losing streak that we've seen in 3 months. Now, in just the last 3 days, companies on the BSE have erased the market cap gains that they clocked over the entire quarter. Hotel stocks, airline stocks, QSR stocks took a beating mainly because of fears that any resurgence in case could spark restrictions that hurt business. Interglobe Aviation, Indian Hotels, Lemon Tree, Devyani International, Jubilant Foodworks and PVR were among the stocks deep in the red. Prashant is here to wrap up the market action for us. Prashant, it's been a brutal day for our markets today.
Well, deep in the red for the markets today. The Nifty ending about 1.8% lower. The Bank Nifty seeing some correction, and it was sharp. Mid caps and small caps even more, 3.5% and 4% cuts respectively on those two indices. Almost a bit of a purge in the broader markets is what we had, and that's an area which is dominated by retail and HNI, etc. And that is where maximum cuts were. And that sense of panic, which I think the market is completely not used to, was prevalent today, was present today. Sectorally, I think except the pharma index, most of the sectors lost, but the most were PSU banks. Forceful pullback continues there. Metals, energy and oil and gas, which came under a fair bit of pressure. Nifty, only 3 names were in the positive. I think, so let's leave it at that. 47 out of the 50 names in the red. Broader losses, as I said, PSU banks is a space, so names on your screen, IOB, Union, UCO, defense names continue to pull back. It's a long list of very large volume-led losses that we had. The bigger question for market participants is, for weeks, actually months, everyone has been used to buying the dip every day and making money and buy the dip sooner rather than later in the day. But it's not worked yesterday on Thursday. It's not worked today as well. So the question is the texture of the market changing a little bit as we come into the fag end of this year? Global participation in terms of volumes, etc., is also thinning out. So price moves will seem exaggerated here and overseas as well. But I think the big question is the texture changing at the margin? Back to you.
Is the texture changing for our markets? Well, we certainly don't see any Christmas cheer at this point in time. Prashant, many thanks for joining us. Now, COVID infections across China continue to rise. According to the World Health Organization, the country reported over 26,000 new cases, 78 deaths in the last 24 hours. Back home, active cases have declined for the 4th day in a row and stand a little above 3,300 as of early this morning. Now, the overall change in COVID cases in India over the last 24 hours stands at 163. The recovery rate is still above 98%. Vaccination rates have also risen in the last 4 days. Over 87,700 people have been inoculated in just the last 24 hours. Prime Minister Modi chaired a high-level meeting to assess the COVID situation yesterday. We learned from government sources that hospitals are organizing mock drills covering all aspects of treatment to ensure readiness in case there is a spike in cases. The health minister has advised states to strengthen surveillance, ramp up testing and ensure readiness of hospital infrastructure. The Civil Aviation Ministry has started random testing of international passengers arriving in India from the 24th of December. 2% of arrivals will undergo testing. The government has reiterated that there is no reason to panic. It's also said it's keeping a close eye on the situation in China. Now, India's top virologist, Dr. Gagandeep Kang, says there is no reason for India to panic because unlike the Chinese population, the Indian population has hybrid immunity. What she explained is that we have a well-vaccinated population with over 90% of the adult population being vaccinated with both doses and some, in fact, with a booster dose as well. And we have a well-infected population with over 90% having been infected with COVID-19 through the course of the last 3 waves. China, on the other hand, did not experience the virus due to its stringent zero-COVID policy. The country was virtually shut down for about the last 3 years, and they haven't been able to vaccinate their vulnerable, aged population, unlike what we've seen here in India.
In China, we are talking about a much larger population. We're talking about a population that has received 2 doses of vaccine some time ago and has not really experienced the virus for the last 3 years. That makes them particularly vulnerable when things open up. India is not in the same situation at all. We have lived through 3 years of the pandemic. We have experience of handling the pandemic. We have a well vaccinated population, and we also have a well infected population. If we look at the rates of infection in our population, that is close to 90%. The adult population, the vaccination rate is above 90%. So overall, we have pretty good hybrid immunity in our population. We do not have any new variants in India. The variants that are circulating now in India are also being seen in many other parts of the world. There is nothing that has emerged that has more severe disease. Delta is the worst we've seen.
Well, that is Gagandeep Kang, and you can catch that conversation with her at 9:30 p.m. right here on India Business Hour. All you need to know about the current COVID situation. Now, the winter session of Parliament has come to an end, with both houses being adjourned 6 days ahead of schedule. Key legislations like the Banking Laws Amendment Bill, the Data Protection Bill, and the insolvency law amendments have been pushed now to next year. Pariksha joins us now with more. Pariksha, really not much to speak of as far as the winter session is concerned. In fact, the government hardly moved any legislative agenda to start with.
Well, that was the reason being given by the opposition, that the government really had no plans to bring any legislative agenda. They were not in a mood to run the House, and that's why the session was curtailed 6 days ahead of schedule. This session had 13 sittings spread over 17 days. 9 bills were passed by both houses out of 25 that were identified for consideration ahead of the session. As per the Parliamentary Affairs Minister, productivity of Lok Sabha was 97%, Rajya Sabha at 103. Among the key bills passed were the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill, Bill to expand the list of scheduled tribes, Anti-Maritime Piracy Bill, and some of the important legislations that we've been hearing for a long time, such as the Data Protection Bill, the Banking Laws Amendment, the amendments to the IBC. They were not brought in this session of Parliament, and probably we will see them in the budget session. There were also a lot of protests in the House over the India-China clashes at Tawang. Almost 12 notices for discussion were rejected by the Rajya Sabha Speaker. All of this was primarily about the China clashes. So the opposition saying that the government is running away from a debate on the state of the economy, on inflation, on the China clashes. The government on its hand said that the session was curtailed in consensus with the opposition because of the festive season around the corner.
Unfortunately, government is extremely diffident about having a discussion on what is happening on our borders or the general disposition of China towards India. And that is extremely unfortunate, because if the government does not take the highest legislative institution into confidence, ipso facto, it is not taking the nation into confidence. To say that it is a matter of national security and therefore there should be no discussion in Parliament, for the lack of a better word, is complete hogwash.
चाइना के बारे में हमने बार बार इनका जो प्रीवियस रिकॉर्ड है वो भी हमने दिया है। नेता का भी आप देखो, वो 1 सप्ताह के लिए बंद कर रहे हैं भारत जोड़ो और विदेश जा रहे हैं। तो ये क्या होता है? जो छुट्टी लेके विदेश जाते हैं और पार्लियामेंट एक दिन भी इधर पाँव नहीं रखते हैं, वो लोग पार्लियामेंट के बारे में बात करते हैं।
That is the end of the winter session of Parliament. Now, stakeholders have raised several concerns over the data protection draft bill. While there have been concerns on the draft bill overriding the RTI law, startups have raised concerns on the penalty of up to 500 crores. Ashmit joins us now with the meetings that have been taking place and the key concerns that are being flagged. Ashmit.
Well, we saw a 120-minute session where the ministry was holding a stakeholder consultation, trying to get comments from various stakeholders, so whether that's telecom companies, IT associations, or even, in fact, startups that are present in the ecosystem. The concerns that have emerged, well, we picked up a few of them. Number one of the concerns that emerged is that the data protection bill overwhelms the RTI Act. Keep in mind that one of the provisions within the data protection bill is that irrespective of larger public interest, personal information regarding bureaucrats, elected leaders will not not be disclosed under RTI. This received some criticism. In fact, some comments said that the RTI should be scrapped entirely. The concern that has been reflected by the ministry, however, is that privacy is a fundamental right and therefore supersedes the right to information, which is not a fundamental right. Another concern that emerged was on the quantum of the penalty. The penalty currently is provided for a maximum of 500 crore rupees. The concern that was reflected, and in fact mostly by startups, is that this should be on a percentage of revenue basis so that the penalty that is computed is commensurate to the size of the company, so that small companies pay small, big companies pay big. That's the second key takeaway. The third is with respect to consent managers. This is a new creature that has been created under the Data Protection Bill. It essentially acts as a middleman, and that was in fact the terminology used by some of the commentators here, is that this will be a new middleman that will be created and hence create more compliance issues. Another concern that was in fact raised a couple of times here was that there's a lack of a compensation mechanism for a user in case of a breach, and that there should be perhaps some provision that will allow for some compensation. The ministry, meanwhile, has welcomed most of these suggestions, has said it will deliberate on these recommendations, but nonetheless has also recorded that business as usual has stopped, that there's a new normal that will take forth, that will take a route which is to be more responsive, which is companies being more responsive to the concerns of the government as well as the users.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. To the tech space, Google has approached the NCLAT seeking relief against Competition Commission's penalty of 1,300 crore rupees. Remember, in October, the CCI had imposed this fine on Google for abusing its dominant position in the Android space. Now, recent Supreme Court and NCLAT judgments have sought to give primacy to the government's dues over banks' dues from companies undergoing the insolvency process. Former Bankruptcy Board Chief MS Sahu and leading bankruptcy lawyer Bairam Vakil have said that this will damage the bankruptcy process and raise the cost of credit for companies. Take a look.
We have a judgment from NCLT Chandigarh, that's versus Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax Department versus Anil Goyal. They have been guided by Rainbow, and they are essentially saying that the statute has created a security. So if that is the thinking of the government, they want to consider security by fiction of law, not by actual security. So you have to consider the consequences it will have, particularly on the availability of credit.
I think there seems to be a rethink. This is something entirely in the government's prerogative. They decided, keeping with international precedent, that the government dues could be low in the waterfall. Because so I hope that the waterfall, as you have very correctly described it, is not upset too much, because then all you do is hurt the banks, increase the cost of credit.
Well, those are still proposals and those amendments have not come in yet. Now, in a major boost to Make in India, the Defence Acquisition Council, led by the Defence Minister, has approved 24 procurement proposals worth 84,300 crore rupees. Of these, 21 proposals worth over 82,000 crore rupees are to be procured from indigenous sources. Of the total 24 proposals, 6 are for the Indian Army, 6 for the Air Force, 10 for the Navy and 2 for the Indian Coast Guard. The big international headlines. For the first time, Russian President Vladimir Putin has referred to the Ukraine conflict as a war and not a special military operation. Speaking to reporters in Moscow, Putin said, and I quote, "Our goal is to end this conflict. We are striving for this and will continue to strive, so we will seek to make sure that it all ends, and the sooner the better," end of quote. His remarks come soon after Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit to the United States. Former FTX boss Sam Bankman-Fried is released on bail after he posts a personal bond for $250 million. He will be kept under house arrest at his parents' home in Palo Alto as he awaits trial for 8 federal criminal charges. Microsoft has filed a response to the U.S. Federal Trade Commission's lawsuit aimed at blocking the software maker from buying Activision Blizzard. It said that the $68.7 billion deal will not harm competition in the video gaming industry. Microsoft added that it's not the video game industry's top console company or software developer. Facebook moves to put the Cambridge Analytica case behind it. Owner Meta agrees to pay $725 million to settle the class action lawsuit, but Meta does not admit to any wrongdoing in the matter. The committee probing the riots on U.S. Capitol Hill on the 6th of January released its final report declaring that the central cause of the attack was one man, Donald Trump, also recommending barring the former president from holding office again. Well, we will head into a break, but up next,